Welcome, everyone, to Conscious Human Evolution podcast and show. I am host Jackson Moore, and with me today I have.
Dr. Kiza Shine, welcome. Today, we are just going to wing it and be Jackson. What do you want to talk about today?
Okay, so to get our podcast started and to launch it to everybody around the world, I think it's probably important to give a little bit of context on, what is the podcast? How did I get here? How are we putting all of this together to help humanity and really the journey, that it took to get here? So initially, there's another video that's on our YouTube channel, and we'll try to split that off so that it makes the podcast as well. But I did a public
It's the
speech.
it's the YouTube channel Conscious Human Evolution on YouTube, correct?
Yes, Conscious
Okay.
Human Evolution, and that will be on YouTube as well.
Okay.
So it's going to be on YouTube and the podcast. Um, but we'll try to split that video out of my talk at Morning Star Spiritual Center at a church that's a spiritual church here in Oklahoma. And in that particular lecture, I talked about my near death experience and how I died when I was a kid. So, just kind of a recap on some of that, just a little bit, and how I got here today and what conscious human evolution is all about. I did have a near death experience. They called it near death, but I was dead. And I went to heaven. I had that whole experience with loved ones that had crossed over, had lucid communication with them, conversations about current events that were going on in my life. Like they knew that I was in Cub Scouts, they knew what I was doing. They were proud of me for being in Cub Scouts, but I didn't join Cub Scouts until after they had died, right? So, how did they know that? They knew current events that were going on in my life. And we were having these conversations on the outside of the light, as this big, brilliant white light, the way that it presented itself to me. And of course, there was angels there, there was Christ there. We had conversations among all of this, and then beings of light that just communicated telepathically, and then as I talk about in that video, when when all of that was kind of wrapping up and it was time for me to go, there was this voice that came from all around me. I call it the God voice. I think it was probably Seth at this point, but it was like as loud as thunder. If cracked thunder was to hit the ground outside of your window, that close, it was like that loud. And it reverberated through everything. And the voice said very calmly, very deep male voice, and it said, "You are safe, but you must go back now, for your work is not yet done." And the minute that that voice said that, instantly I was back in the barn. And as I tell the story, I was looking at my dead body, like completely outside of it, and it was lifeless. And so I went through that in that video. But after that, what is really kind of applicable on this journey was within about 2 weeks or so after that near death experience, that's when all of the psychic stuff really started happening. And so you hear about that where somebody gets into a car accident or whatever else and it kicks that in. What it does is it expands your consciousness, which expands your awareness. And then all of a sudden you're aware of these things that were always there, but they were just kind of hidden because your rational mind and the brain is focused on this fascinating three-dimensional reality, right? So when it all sparked one day, I figured out that I could see the future and I could literally tell somebody this is going to happen. And I could tell not when, it might be a day, it might be 3 days, it might be a week, but I could tell that something was going to happen and it would happen. And so that was kind of like deja vu to me. Yes, question.
How did you know that you could tell? Was it a, something that you saw? Was it a feeling? Was it just like this knowing? How did you
I
know?
would have, okay, so I would have like either a dream at night and I would wake up and then a day later or that day or whatever that was, it happened. Or I would have a daydream. I'd be playing or doing something or fishing as a kid. And I get this little daydream, like a little movie in my head. And so, whether it was in the dream state or I was awake and it was in the dream state, which is a daydream, then I would get these images. And it's just like a full color movie with sound and everything else where you'd be able to see these things. And so, to me, it was just kind of a little fascinating thing. But as a kid, I really just didn't pay any attention to it until there was about 2 weeks after, somewhere roughly in that time frame. a couple of weeks after my near-death experience, one day, it was in the summertime when this happened, of course, and I was not in school. We were on summer vacation. And so then one day I wound up going out into the kitchen. My mom was out there cleaning the kitchen or whatever. And I ran up to my mom and I said, Mom, and I tell the story in the video as well, right? Where I said, Mom, can we go to the beach? And she's like, What? And I said, Uncle Mike, her brother, Uncle Mike and Aunt Brenda, his wife, are going to the beach. And they want to know if me and the boys can go, my brothers. So I got three brothers. And she's like, What are you talking about? I says, Uncle Mike and Aunt Brenda are going to the beach. They want to know if me and the boys can go. Can we go? She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So we're having this conversation. I'm like, What do you not understand about that? You're like, This is pretty simple, right? And so the phone rings. And then she picks up the phone and she says, Hello. And it's my Uncle Mike. And he says, Hey, Arlene, it's Uncle Mike here. He says, We're going to go to the beach. We want to know if you and the boys want to go. Do you want to go? And so my mom looks at me and she's like, Well, yeah, I guess we do. And I was like, Awesome. So I went and I ran, I got my brothers and I was like, Here we go. So when I came back, my mom said, How did you do that? I said, Do what? She's like, You knew that he was going to call and ask if we wanted to go to the beach. And I'm like, Yeah, didn't you? And she's like, No. She said, How did you do that? And I said, Well, I was in my room and I was playing. And while I was playing, I got this little video that played in my head, and it was the phone ringing, and it was Uncle Mike. And he said, Hey, do you and the boys want to go to the beach? And you said, Yes. So I ran out here to ask you, Can we go to the beach? She said, Yeah, but you did it before it happened. If it never even occurred, how did you know exactly what was going to happen before it ever occurred? And I'm 10, right? I'm like, I don't know. How did I know? Like, doesn't everybody do this? She's like, No, they don't. So as a kid, right, I started asking, how does that happen? And then I had it again and again and again. And then later I noticed I could see plane crashes, train crashes, and death events and stuff like that. And of course, as a child, I didn't really understand that. And back then, it was more of a fascination thing. And then after a while, I noticed there was a lot of death things. And it really took until later on, years later, when I began channeling angels, that they actually explained that to me. And they said, because there's no time and space, and time and space are just illusions of the five human senses. Right? The five human senses literally create an illusion of time and space. And so the soul is beyond that. Energy and consciousness is beyond it, beneath it. And they said, with a birthday party, if you get 30 people together and they turn the lights off and everybody's ready and they got the cake and the candles and all that other stuff, and they flip the lights on when you open the door and they say, Happy birthday, there's this big surprise, right? So there's this joy, there's this fun and everything else. There's exhilaration that goes with that. It's this much energy. But if you have a short circuit that is in the wiring in the wing tank of an aircraft and 230 people are aboard and there's an explosion and it blows that plane in half and it spins and spirals down to the ocean, you have 230 people have a mortal fear of death. And there's a massive spike of energy that goes, and that massive spike of energy transcends all space and time. And so, therefore, it is perceptible in the future and in the past, and we feel it and we sense it in the soul, and the soul can read it multidimensionally. It can read it, it can feel it, it can see it, it can sense it, it can hear it. And so the soul has all the clear abilities. So as a kid, like, I noticed all of these things happening, and I could tell somebody, and then 2 or 3 days later they would, happen. And so that is where all the questions started me on the journey to be able to say, how do I do this? How do I see the future if it's never even happened? And of course, now I understand it's just a probable future that may or may not happen based on all the individual choices that we make. It brings it into focus or does not bring it into focus, right? So obviously, we have free will and choice as a soul, and we can then choose what it is that we want to focus on, which brings it into physical focus for the five human senses to be able to paint that picture as physical reality or not. So I followed that journey. There was a period of time, I suppose, in my 20s. I kind of really backed off the spiritual stuff. Didn't I did it? I still did it. Still did my meditation and stuff, but it really wasn't my focus. Life was good. I had job, money, material. Everything was going great. And then I
Don't you
had
think
some,
that's the normal evolution of being human, though? Like you're on it and then you're off of it, and then you're on it and then you're off of
oh, yeah,
it.
yeah,
Okay.
it's like the stock market. It's always like this, right? But it's always going up. You know
Right,
what I mean, right? So you got your zigzags, but
right.
it's always going up. And so, fascinating journey. But really, I didn't focus on the spiritual stuff. Then I had these events happen in my life. And, I won't really get into them, but as a man, obviously some of these events are connected to a woman and my son's mother. And, she's no longer with us today, but I learned a lot about energy. But that series of events really brought me to my knees. And, in the beginning, I was very, very angry. I learned what anger does. And anger is like holding onto a hot coal and wondering why your own hand is burning, right? Because you're the one that's holding on to it. And when you fully let it go, all of a sudden you're not angry anymore. You're not upset anymore. Whatever it is doesn't move you anymore emotionally. Therefore, it has no effect on you. And you transcend the lesson, you move above and beyond it. So I learned a lot, but it was really kind of that event or series of events over a number of years that brought me to my knees. And in my public lecture this past weekend, I was explaining to somebody, here it is. It's like spirit, like they throw a stone, it's the little knock on the window, tick, and you're like, that's interesting. And then tick, that's interesting. Then it's a brick that goes through the window. You're like, damn. And then the next thing you know, it's a cinder block that goes through the window and on your toes. And if you still don't listen, like I didn't listen because I'm stubborn, I'm stubborn like a lot of people, you get what I call the cosmic two by four. And the cosmic two by four is a smack upside the head that will drop you to your knees. So if somebody dies, you get divorced, you lose something in your life that's very precious to you, whatever it is. But if the universe, God, source, whatever, if it wants to get your attention, if your soul wants to get your attention, you need to go this way on your journey and your path. It will, honey, get your attention. I assure you. So
I've experienced that. I know what you're talking about.
it's probably going to hurt. So, so really, that's kind of what got me to say, okay, what's going on here is way above and beyond just coincidence. I mean, this is so far out of like this would never happen. That's a reality check. And so I finally started asking the right questions about, okay, what is going on? That's when I learned I need to let go of the anger. I need to forgive. I need to replace the anger with love. And I did and healed that relationship. And in the end of her life, with my son's mother, her and I were very, very good friends. And it was really awesome for my son to be able to see that level of healing, knowing what I had went through and that she had taken everything from me. And there was some horror stories there, but really that's what brought me to the spiritualism. That's what really brought me back full circle to, hey, I remember I could do these things when I was a kid. I need to start using that to change my life because this is not the direction I want to go. So that's when I had some of those events where that put me back on the path, and then I started meditating and I started journaling and I started using my tools. Went back to reading all my spiritual books and everything else, and I started practicing. And this is inching me down this path to where we are today, having this conversation. And so I remember I was meditating, and at one point in this whole thing, I was out of work. I'd lost my job through some freak thing that would never happen, but it happened. And I lost, money, property, my retirement, 401k, like stock, everything. And I was in this really bad place, and I was kind of in the ditch, in the dirt, where a lot of people find themselves sometimes. And this is the wake up. This is your call. So I went to meditate one day, and I had not yet learned a channel back then. And I finally sat down on the bed and I said, okay, normally I get up, early in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning. I have my coffee, I'm doing my meditation. I said, I'm not having coffee because I'm not going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to sit here for 3 days. If I need to, I'm going to sit here until you talk to me, until you answer me. And I was very persistent that I wanted communication from the divine because I knew my friend Cindy Green, who does all the spirit fairs down here in Oklahoma, She's got tens of thousands of people that follow her. She can do it. I can do it. She has consciousness. I have consciousness. So I knew that was possible. And I sat down to meditate and I went into a deep meditation. And this is very profound. So I think this is a good thing for people to pay attention to is that I got into that quiet space and I was about 2 hours in. And all of a sudden, I was in that same dark space where it's just nothing. I call it the void, and it's not a negative thing. It's filled with just love, like unimaginable love. Even though it looked visually like just darkness with no stars. So it's kind of like you're out in the universe. But essentially, the symbolic meaning behind that is I'm out in space. I'm lost, right? I'm just out there. And then I remember in this vision, I have this vision 2 hours into my meditation. I'm in this space. I'm kind of lost. I look to the right and there's a castle and it's made of stone and it's like miles long in each direction. But there's only one window in the entire castle that's got light coming out of it. So I float toward the castle and I float up to the window, and the window was flat at the bottom, round at the top, and it was a bright light coming out of the window. And it was in kind of a rounded part of the castle. And the castle was made out of massive stones. And so, again, symbolic. I float through the window, and inside the window, there's a round room. And now I look around the round room, and I notice hallways going in every direction, many of them all around me. And as I turn and I look, in every direction, there's a hallway. And on both sides of the hallway, there's wooden doors with rounded tops. And the rounded top of the door, it's made out of wood, and there's light that is seeping from around the edges of every single one of the doors. And as I come full circle, there's an angel, like the ones that I saw when I died. And it is floating just above the floor, maybe 18 inches above the floor. And it looked just like the holographic bluish white shape of an angel. And it had like millions of sparkly rainbow like specks of light that is just alive, in it. And this angel said to me that within this castle and behind each door are the answers to every question, not only that I have ever asked in my whole life, but every question I could ever ask. And then it went like this, and it held out like these hands, and the hands were holding a big key, like a foot long, made out of solid gold, and it was glowing. Yes,
Would some people relate to that as maybe like the Akashic Records?
they
That kind
would.
of is what it sounds like.
They would.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and I've had
Okay.
that where people make that connection, the Hall of Knowledge,
Yeah.
um, the Ark of Knowledge, that sort of thing, but it is essentially in consciousness. And so the angel then held out its hand and handed me this golden key. And it said, this key will open the door, every door in the castle, which contains the answer to any question you could ever ask in all of eternity. And so, and then as it handed me the key, then it started floating up toward the ceiling and ascending. And as it ascended, it was the same voice that spoke to me when I was in heaven when I died as a child. And this voice said, he who knows and is the light shall make the darkness end. And then when it did that, it felt like thunder again, like it shook the ground. And it was so profound. I popped out of meditation and I was like, oh my God. I was like, surely the neighbors heard that. Like it shook the house and the earth. So I
Will you
literally
say it one
ran.
more time? Say it one more time because it is so epic.
What?
Say it again.
Say what again?
What he said. The voice.
Oh, it just came from like when the angel ascended, it said, he who knows and is the light shall make the darkness end.
Yeah.
Because when I went into meditation, I wrote in my journal, all of this is darkness, right? I'm lost in the darkness. How do I make the darkness end? And its answer was, he who knows and is the light shall make the darkness end. So I run outside, I look at the neighbor, and he's sitting there with a beer, got the radio on, listening to the football game, and he's in the lawn chair. And I'm like, well, he's not freaking out looking at the sky and whatever else. I'm like, do these people not hear this? So clairaudiently, I knew it came to me clairaudiently. And so again, then I was like, okay, well, who says that? And I was like, and who was that? And then I was like, what did that mean? He who knows and is the light. Well, now, of course, I know. I was asking how to make the darkness end. He who knows, you know what the light is. The light is the truth. The truth is the light. The soul, I am. And if you, it's not enough to know about it. You have to be. You have to be the light. So he who knows and is the light. And so here's the symbolism behind this. I'm in the darkness. I'm lost. I go into the castle. I'm safe. In the big, massive castle, strength. I then go into the castle, and now I'm out of the darkness into the light. As I go into the light, I meet the angel. The angel in the light gives me the key that will open the door to any door in the castle, which contains all answers for every piece of guidance that I could ever want. And that vision right then is what really set me forth on reading more books, doing more meditations. And then very shortly thereafter that's when I really sat down and decided I wanted to learn to channel. I had a friend of mine that did it. I have another friend of mine. I got another friend of mine. I'm like, if they can all do it, I can do it. So I sat down and I started practicing. And that's when I learned to channel. And then the general process, I would meditate, clear my mind. I would set my intention. I would pray and call in, the angels. At that time, I really wasn't calling upon Seth consciousness, but I would call in the angels and the archangels and fill myself with that love and divine light. And then when I would come out of meditation, when my mind is clear, I would write some questions and then I would listen in my mind and then I would write whatever I got. And then we just go pages and pages and pages. And of course, after a while, you start seeing words show up on the page that you have no idea what the word means. And when they're using words that you don't know what they mean, and then you go and you look them up later, and it has perfect context in the way that they used it, you know that that's not coming from your brain, it's coming through your consciousness and onto the page. And so that's when I started channeling. And so I started doing that like going to the gym every day that I could. I would channel and channel and channel and channel because you're developing that spiritual muscle. You're widening a channel in consciousness with intention, with love, and everything else. And as you widen that channel, you can perceive more. And all of a sudden, you open up your clair abilities, clairvoyance, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairgustance, claircognizance. And then all of a sudden, you're relating to physical reality and all reality at a whole different level than everybody else around you. It's like there's this movie called Lucy. Don't know if you've ever seen it, but it is kind of I think it's got Scarlett Johansson in it from
Okay.
the Avengers,
Okay.
and in there, she takes this drug that exponentially expands her consciousness, and she gets to the point where literally she can interact with all consciousness of various things and affect shape and matter, and so that's very very similar to what we really can do, and so there's a lot of context there and stuff like that. So really once I began that journey of channeling, then it was the next step to again manifestation and learn to manifest job, money, materials, a new car, house, money, relationship, business, entrepreneur stuff. So I really kind of took that, and it was fascinating the way that things would just magically show up, and the way that they would just happen. And so there's that materialistic trying to figure out what you can do to push the boundaries and the senses. And that's fun in and of itself. And it starts you wondering because you can literally affect physical reality, animals, plants, people, relationships, business relationships, personal relationships, right? You can cause behaviors, you can cause responses from the animals, from people, from business. So then once I opened that up, I started using that in business. And of course, I took off in business and
Sure.
very good in various aspects and stuff like that. So that really kind of brought me to sitting down one day and trying some manifestations, which then I had trouble with back in 2016. That's when I got to the place where I was like, okay, I did everything that I used to do. It wasn't working. I said the master at manifesting miracles was Christ. So that's when I sat down one day and I said, I want, when I'm done with my meditation, I'm going to speak with angels. I'm going to speak with Christ. I said this when I was at my public event, doing my lecture the other day, and everybody laughed. And I said, so when I sat down, I said, my intention is I'm going to speak with Christ consciousness, and I'm going to speak about miracles and creating manifestations and that sort of thing. And I said, so I'm not going to communicate with angels. I said, it's going to be Christ, Christ, Christ. You got that? Christ. I was like, that's not clear. I'm going to spell it Christ. Everybody laughed. And I said, I'm serious. I literally was doing that. Very
Way to
being.
demand from the universe.
And then when I come out of meditation and stuff, and then got out my journal and my pen. Back then, I did it with a journal and a pen, and now I type because it's so much. I can get much faster and easier. But I sat down, and then this entity started answering me, and and of course, I noticed the energy was far different. And it's fascinating because when you develop your abilities to the point where you can feel energy, you can literally, it would be like me trying to explain to you what the feeling of hot air and cold air, or hot water and cold water was. If you didn't have nerves and you couldn't sense them, how could I convey that there's a difference between hot water and cold water? But you can feel the difference between a loved one when they're near their presence, and then a guide and an angel and a conscious collective. They have different vibrational energies, and so you sense that. And so this entity kept speaking to me, and finally, after about 2 or 3 days, I said, do you have a name that I can refer to you by? Because you're definitely way different than the angels. And that's when he came back, and I talk about that in, the nature of consciousness in our new book, that he said, consciousness, he responded and he said, consciousness does not have nor use names because there is no separation in consciousness. But you may call me Seth, the multidimensional conscious collective that authored the Seth books. At which time I literally burst out laughing, and I laughed out loud. I was like, yeah, 6 billion people on the planet. And this Seth entity that's known by tens of millions of people all over the earth is going to come and channel and talk to me. Well, that was the beginning. And I've been doing that for almost 10 years now. We got this book out. The second book is going to be out later this year. That'll be volume two of the nature of consciousness. Volume one is about mostly human consciousness and really unlocking the potential of what we can do as a soul within a body, and talk about here's what you can do. And that's where it starts, is belief. Because if you do not believe that you can do these things, then within the boundaries of your own belief, you create your perception of reality. And so this first step is belief. Then once you believe what you can do, then it's a matter of expanding that and doing those things and growing that inner portion of yourself. So book one is more or less about the human consciousness and what we can do there and our connectivity. There's some fascinating things in there about the pyramids and how they were built and how consciousness communicated the plans to build them across the planet. So they're similar over here, and they're half planet apart from each other. There's some really goodies in there, some things at the end about the Christ consciousness. And then volume two, we'll talk more about plants, animals, trees, earth, nature, rocks, and consciousness within all physical reality, which is that which has atoms and molecules. Off planet consciousness, aliens, extraterrestrial, and then, of course, extraterrestrial lives in our universe, but in our physical universe, but interdimensional beings literally live in another parallel dimension, but come through what people call portals, but Seth and I call them coordinate points, which are you can't sense them with the five human senses, but they're points of energy, and there's millions, of course, all over what we would think is the earth or in the universe. There's four main ones that intersect all dimensions of reality, physical or not, all dimensions. It's like the God source. And then
Fascinating.
there's smaller ones from that. And so we'll talk about that in volume two. And then beyond that, we'll be doing a book called The Avatar of the Soul. And we'll talk about literally the incarnation process and some of those sort of things. And then we'll get into later on down the road some of the tools of creation, what they do to consciousness, how they direct it. And then, of course, we'll advance on to simultaneous existences of the multidimensional soul. And we'll talk about how you open up your perceptions to multidimensional knowledge and wisdom, and literally can connect with other lifetimes see what they see and bring those lessons into this lifetimes. So the journey has been bringing this to where I understood it and I can articulate it. And I've really taught about this stuff my whole life informally, but 9 years now, a little close on 10 formally. And of course, I formed a company around it and eventually evolved that company into Conscious Human Evolution, which is incorporated as a 501(c)(3) nonprofit in the state of Oklahoma to be the global teaching platform to be able to bring the teachings of the timeless truths to humanity. So now,
So, how do you plan on bringing those teachings to humanity? Are you going to do online or in person? What's your plan with that?
their plan, which is so funny because it's not a little plan. Their plan is to reach as many people across the planet in 43 languages in 209 countries in every way possible. But I will tell you that during the time that Seth Entity channeled and created the original Seth books back in the 1960s through 1984, when Jane passed away, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have social media. There wasn't Facebook and some of these other things that are out there. So today we have those abilities. Now, it's not a coincidence that I literally have an electrical engineering degree. So I know about atoms, molecules, electromagnetic induction, between inductors and everything else. I understand energy. I have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Information Sciences. I understand technology. And so an MBA and everything else to be able to understand business. So I've got the background that literally has been put together and brought me down this path to be able to leverage technology to use social media, the internet, videos, and we're going to do, printed books, of course, um, which is the original way. We're going to do the printed books, but then we're doing audio books and now video with a podcast and the show. So we're going to reach them audio, video, printed books, digital, ebook, Kindle, in every way possible. And eventually they'll be translated into 43 languages or, many more than there is today to be able to reach the people around the earth. So no
For
small,
those that love the audiobook version, you want to tell some exciting news about that?
I will. And I'll start with a friend of mine and I'll mention her name. Her name is Deanna. And she's a very good friend of mine that's really kind of been a good spiritual, one of those ones where you bounce stuff off of and you
Hmm.
get that energy going and stuff like you and I, right? So you get that energy going and you're like, oh, yeah, that's fascinating. And the more you do that, the more it opens, both of you up. Really, it's a collective thing. And so Deanna said to me a long time ago, many years ago, she said, I've always been an audio learner, and I never really understood it as much then. But she said, when I was in school as a kid, they could write it on the board and I didn't understand it. And if somebody gave me a book, I could read it and I really didn't understand it or get it. But if I listened to it, I could listen to it once and it's like a photographic memory. I'd nail it and I'd have it forever. And I know there's other people that are like that because now I've had many people at many public events come up and talk to me about that. They learn audiently. And so instead of visually, um, so the audio book was put together. It's about three-quarters of the way, half, three-quarters of the way done now. And the target is going to be to have that released globally on all platforms that carry audiobooks by the end of February. So that's going to be the target, but it'll be around that time. And then the actual volume 2 of the Nature of Consciousness will come later on this year, of course, and then that'll be available with all those different versions
That's so
as well.
exciting.
So
Where can people go to get a hard copy of your incredible volume one?
So the books are actually sold at up to 45,000 locations, I think, all over the world, multiple countries. I've literally had people from many other countries that have bought the book in their own country. You can buy it available. It's available on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, of course. And so you can buy it that way, or you can go to our website, conscioushumanevolution.org, and if you buy it off of Amazon, they get most of the profits, as do all the major big retailers. If you buy it on our website at conscioushumanevolution.org, that most of that money, aside from the cost, all of that is brought back to the nonprofit organization. Really helps us do what we do. So,
I love that so
good question.
much.
Mhm.
Do you want to tell, as we're wrapping this up, would you like to tell our followers kind of a roadmap of where we're going with this beautiful podcast?
So yeah, that'd be great. Really, I think it's about this first couple is going to be setting the foundation of how we got here, how Jackson got here, and what I want readers and listeners and viewers and all the people that are touched by our material to understand is these things are literally it's them we're talking about, right? This is your soul. Your soul can do these things. Your soul has the ability to do anything that you or I do, anything that Christ ever did. And as he said, these things that I have done, so shall you do also, and much greater things shall you than these shall you do. He meant we will do greater things than he himself had done. Right? We're meant for this. It's the immortal soul that does this. It is your rational mind that thinks you can't. When you train the rational mind, that is what we're doing with conscious human evolution is we're training the rational mind of the world, of people around the world, to understand that when you are born in this lifetime, your brain is born in this lifetime. It only sees what's in this lifetime. It only uses the five human senses, which perceives things to be separate from you. When you shift your orientation to viewing everything from the soul, now you're connected to everything. And in so being, you can draw it to you. You know what I mean?
I
So
love it.
I tell people that, it's like when I did in the lecture, I said, you think that you're standing here listening to one man, Jackson, that was up here talking to you in this lecture. I said, I am not one man. I am many individual personalities and souls that come through me as a gestalt consciousness that then speak. So when you think you're looking at one or hearing one, I'm not one, I'm the many. But in being the many, a multidimensional conscious collective speaking through me, I am the one, which is the God source, one with all things. It is that recognition that you are one with all things that draws those things magnetically into your life. And you can just do magic. It's a beautiful thing. And this is really where the evolution of humanity is going. It's free will and choice on following that in a daily pattern that will get us there.
What a beautiful thought to end on.
Mm.
I would like to encourage other people that are interested in hearing more of this to please go to conscioushumanevolution.org. You could sign up for our email. You can also submit a question for the podcast that Jackson and I can answer as we go along our journey. And please check out all the platforms, YouTube plus all the podcast platforms for future episodes. And we will definitely keep you posted. Anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we'll try to do that. I think we'll try to take questions via the website. If they go to the contact us and submit a question, then I think we'll set up a mechanism where people can submit those, and then if they put their name in there or something, I'll say Deanna from the state of Missouri or
Mhm.
Joe from Spain has a question about such and such, and we'll try to answer some of those. But I think answering some of those questions for some of our listeners really gets them the information that they want to know specific to things they're trying to change in their life. And we'll open that door as much as we can, but the teachings will evolve and we'll keep growing it from here. So thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you for sharing just a few moments of your life with us and with Dr. Shine and I. And we'll see you again on another episode soon.
See you soon.
Thank you.
This is how legends are made.